Hello and welcome to The Insider, a show designed to clue you into the biggest news, events and announcements inside the video games industry, discussing with you some things you may know, some things you may not, and the glue that holds it all together is a little bit of my own opinion. My name is Paul James, thank you very much for watching, and let's kick off the episode. So the hype train for Borderlands 3 is well underway. The game has a release date, it's September this year. It's much sooner than a lot of us anticipated. There's a lot of excitement about the game. We've got the Game of the Year remaster of the first game. There's plenty of awesome Borderlands things going on. But it's not to say that it's totally smooth sailing. There's a few little things in the background that are giving me reason for a little bit of concern. We're going to discuss all of those in this week's episode of The Insider. So let's get going. So let's begin with the most recent breaking bit of news about Borderlands and some of the discussions going on around it, and that is the Troy Baker Reese from Tales from the Borderlands news. Troy Baker was in Australia just this past weekend. He was at Supernova in Melbourne, and a fan questioned him about, Reese is in the Borderlands 3 trailer, does that mean you're going to be in Borderlands 3? To which Troy actually responded saying no, like he would love to be in it, but no, that's not the case. And there was a lot of disappointment about that. I was disappointed about that as a fan of Tales from the Borderlands and what Troy had done with that Reese character. So then people followed that conversation up by reaching out to Randy Pitchford, the head of Gearbox, the team responsible for Borderlands and Borderlands 3. They asked him on Twitter what the go was, and Randy's response was, well, we reached out to Troy or his team, and we got the response saying that no, he didn't want to be a part of it, which then doesn't gel with the fact that Troy was saying this past weekend that he really wanted to be a part of it. So someone is bending the truth a little bit here. My gut, just because of his history, as much as I love the guy, says that it's possibly Randy, or him doing it on behalf of Gearbox ultimately, or some decisions made by Gearbox. I hope that it is something they overturn. At this particular stage, we're still about 6 months from the release of the game. It's time for them to change that. They can change that if they want, if the fan outcry is loud enough, if Troy is ready and willing and happy to do it, and it's not too far gone for the final product. We'll have to wait and see, but fingers crossed. The second thing to discuss are some unconfirmed, unsubstantiated reports about studio cultural issues at Gearbox, which is really interesting given some past reports where they've got a really great structure in place that allows developers to get a far larger sum of money, like their actual monetized payment for their work, than you would get a lot of other studios around the world, within America, outside of it. It sounds like there's some actually great things going on there. There's some certain concerns when it comes to Randy and his behaviour. Everything seems to be coming back to Randy Pitchford here. There was obviously some reports about some stuff that was left on a USB drive earlier this year or late last year about some of his behaviour there. Is that necessarily indicative of a larger problem? That remains to be seen. But there's a few reports, and again, unsubstantiated, that are saying that Randy and other executives on the product are really pushing people harder than they ought to be. They're getting abusive. It's not a good studio culture. And I understand there's a bit of pressure on the team because their last product, Battleborn, was not received all that well. And prior to that, Borderlands 2 came out, and I'm ignoring the pre-sequel here because that was developed externally. Borderlands 2 wasn't released till 2012. It's been quite a while between drinks. There's a lot of pressure on Borderlands 3, and I can understand that creates a very anxious sort of mood and atmosphere. You only have to speak to people at BioWare after the news that we discussed last week about what it must be like being under this cloud of doubt and pressure and concern. But let's hope that this supposed studio culture, if it is true, doesn't affect the final product. Of course, the people who are working there are, of course, the most important people involved here. We wish the very best for them. But by extension, I hope that nothing else affects that game as well, because there's so many good, positive things that can come out of this game. Just before Borderlands 3 was debuted, I put a piece up on the Player 2 website, and it was basically me. I had a few questions that I was asking for Gearbox, things that I was looking for, and one of those things that I spoke about was the number of playable protagonists. through every Borderlands game so far, ignoring Tales from the Borderlands because it's a totally different sort of experience, every core Borderlands game so far has featured 4 playable protagonists. There have been others added later, as we've seen in the more recent entries, but the core game begins with 4 playable protagonists. And I am still of the firm belief that that doesn't fly in 2019. We're in a very different era here. And whilst those characters are very diverse and they're going to have great personalities, and we're going to see Brick and all the past stars feature in some way, shape or form throughout the course of Borderlands 3. The trailers have already told us that. I would love to have seen a little bit more made available to us. Up that to 8. Give us 8 unique, different characters there. And I'm not looking for a Battleborn. I'm not looking for an Overwatch. But a few more choices, a little bit more diversity would have gone a long way. We're probably going to see some added post-launch, similar to what we've seen in Borderlands 2. But it's just one nagging thing that I wish they could have added. It would have made a lot of difference in my mind, and I'm sure in the minds of a few other Borderlands fans. I've discussed a few concerns, and I think they are warranted concerns. But let's focus on the big picture here. Borderlands 3 is looking fantastic. The game looks great. There's some really cool new gun manufacturers and new guns. There's a new premise with the whole walking, talking, abusive guns. That seems just totally Borderlands. The box art looks fantastic. It's going to touch the nerve of a few very, very especially ultra devout Christians, and maybe it's time to harden up a little bit, spoken as a Christian. Anyone who's sooking about the Epic Game Store exclusivity thing, shut up. And we're only a week or so away now, a couple of weeks, sorry, I should say, from the May 1st gameplay reveal. There's people being flown over from Australia and all around the world to go experience this live when it happens, and that bodes really, really well for the game. That's a lot of confidence that they're putting in this product, and I can't wait to see more about it. It's not without its worries. I've outlined a few of those in this episode, but overall, Borderlands 3 is shaping up really, really well. I can't wait to be able to talk more about it as the year goes on. Keep in touch with that via Patched or The Insider or various other shows in the future. That concludes this week's episode of The Insider. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider liking, sharing and subscribing. All those buttons are down below here, and hit that notification bell. That way you're alerted to every new video the moment it goes live on the channel. I probably just pointed at the wrong spot. That includes Patched, The Insider, Player 2 Plays, Late Game Review, Gamer School, and a whole bunch more. There's some awesome content there, so please be sure to go and check it out. Also visit the website, player2.net.au, for a whole bunch of written content. That includes reviews, previews, opinion pieces, news, features, the Player 2 Writers Draft. There's links to our podcast series, the Player 2 Podcast, which is now the host for the Player 2 Pixelcast, and my little baby, Dev Diary. Please be sure to go and check those out. Subscribe to the podcasts. We're also on Patreon, patreon.com/player2au, kicking a few bucks. At the lower tiers, you get early access to episodes, and at the higher tiers, you get monthly episode exclusives. Finally, there's Twitter. You can find me at Paul James Games, the website you'll find at player2au, and until next time, that is Borderlands 3 summed up as we know it. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you next time.